Welcome to another episode of the Albion TV interview series. Today we have the great honor of interviewing Robin Henkys, Game Director of Albion Online. How you doing, Robin?
Hey, I'm doing well now.
Good to hear. We're also joined by Bogul. Go ahead and say hi, Bog.
Hallo, hallo.
I really want to get right into the roads of Avalon. It sounds very interesting. We just had an interview last week with a player from Eve who says, these roads of Avalon sound a lot like wormholes. And he was like, you should bring that up with your CEO and see what he says. So I want to know more than anything else, how do we get into these and how do we navigate these roads?
Right. So maybe to quickly address that, I think if you're building a sandbox world that, as you know, with the hideouts, we moved into guilds actually living out in the world. And then you start thinking about, well, that fixes a lot of problems with force projection and makes makes the conflict more local and so on. But you start thinking about the issues that arise from that too. You start thinking about what about the players who don't have any local conflict but want some action. So you end up with having to solve the question: how do you bring these players together without allowing them to move armies around again, which was the reason for moving them out into the world in the first place. So that's how we came up with the Roads of Avalon idea, and the similarities to other systems are, kind of the nature of them trying to solve trying to solve the same thing. So when it comes to how you get into them, the current plan, and I say current plan because this is still in development, but we're advanced further now, so a lot of this is already kind of finalized, or at least approaching a first version of implementation where we can then test it and then see if we're happy with it. So the way that you would find them is simply through we call them mist portals or fog portals. They're kind of like these sections in the world. They're kind of appearing, these kind of cloudy, foggy portals, I guess, that lead into the mists of Avalon. And they would appear across the open world, kind of similar to how other things appear in Albion, right? You're probably going to see them on the minimap. We haven't finalized this, but it's probably going to be visible that there is a sort of a pathway on the minimap. And there's going to be different sizes of these pathways. So there's going to be small ones that only let a single player through at a time. And then there's going to be bigger ones that let maybe 10 players through. And then the biggest one maybe lets 20 players or something like that through. We haven't finalized the numbers there. And it's also important to know that when I say they only let that through, that means they only let them through per a certain amount of time. So, for example, the solo entrance lets one player through every couple of minutes. So that doesn't mean that, in theory, you could move more people through a small entrance, but it's going to take you a really long time. And obviously, since these portals aren't stable, they will eventually collapse. It's kind of impossible to move a very large army through a small entrance.
All right. So what you're saying is we had been hearing about people trying to force close portals in Eve, where people would go through, then go back through, and then go through, and then go back through again, and force it closed by themselves. Is that going to be possible here?
That is not something we're currently wanting to do. The connections in Albion will be stable for a certain amount of time, and after that time they will collapse. But the players right now will have no way of closing them if they don't want a particular connection. That may be something that we will evaluate the further we get with this whole thing, but right now that's not the plan. Mainly because we felt, well, it feels a little bit abusive in a way if you can kind of pick and choose the connections that you're gonna get. Instead, we want to really encourage you having to deal with what you get on a particular day.
Okay, so for example, in you would have a portal that say it's going to stay there for 4 hours, right? And it's a medium portal, so you can get 10 people through at a time, but you get 10 people through, and then it closes for, say, half an hour or something. But for the next 10 hours, every time it opens, it would go to the same location in the mist.
Yes, that's how it's currently planned. Yeah.
Okay. Once you're in the mist, how do you get from one point in the mist to the next? It sounds like you navigate inside because they're the roads of Avalon. Is this you go from one location to another random location inside the mist?
Yeah, so basically when you enter the mist, what you find yourself in is, we keep calling it the estates of Avalon. So not Avalon itself, but the sort of, if you imagine the mystical island in the island in the fog, right? You find your way on the path to that island, and so you'll be on a road that the Avalonians built millennia ago, and that is kind of holding away the mists. So right next to the road, you'll see the mists. And in some places, the mists become less dense, and they allow you to explore a little bit of what's next to the road. So you'll find, interesting little side locations, like pockets where there's particularly valuable resources, or where there's a small Avalonian outpost where they're protecting some treasure, something like that. So basically, it's not only the roads itself where you can travel on, but you can explore a little bit left and right of the road. But it's also not quite, a fully free-roaming open world location. It is mainly following the roads of Avalon, which traverse this mist. And when you get to sort of the end of the road, you will typically end up at another one of these mist portals, which will then connect to a different section of the road. So basically, the Avalonians built up this travel network of roads that allow them to be present in all of Albion, and they're now reactivating. Actually, I'm maybe spoiling a bit too much here. Obviously, this is going to be part of some reveals that we have in the future. But that's kind of the backstory. Is that we're seeing them, they've awoken with the Queen update, and now we're seeing them become more active and reactivating some of their old presence in Albion. And this is going to be the first step that we see, where they are reactivating their mode of travel that allowed them to be present in all of Albion.
I do have one follow-up there. In the dev talk, I think you kind of mentioned that players can quote-unquote live there. Can I, in the side pockets, put down a hideout?
So the current plan is not that you can put a hideout in every location in the roads, but that there are particular places that are connected via the roads where you can do that. But like the average section of the roads does not have enough space, or it does not currently allow a hideout to be placed anywhere. The reason for that is that we wanted, partially because the mode of control over a hideout requires a territory, and we didn't want territories all over the roads. However, these particular locations will feature territories that are then further away from the outland. So short answer is you will be able to live in places that are found within the roads, but not every section of the road allows living there.
Okay. Interesting. You said in the dev talk as well that this is designed for small-scale combat. When you say small-scale combat and territory control, What kind of numbers are you talking here for taking a territory?
Well, I mean, it really depends on what the guilds will be able to get into that sort of region. Like I said, there's no hard cap here because a hard cap is really difficult to make sense. Instead, we're relying on this mechanism that makes it impractical to move large groups around. What we're expecting is that there'll be a lot of people using these roads in very small groups, so maybe 1 or 2 people, who are mostly either using it for traveling from one place to the other, or for hunting for valuable treasures in the roads or valuable resources in the roads. And then the second type of group we're expecting is somewhere in the range of 5 to 10 players that are maybe hunting for the more difficult locations within the roads, or who are using this to travel to their guild, to and from their guild locations in the roads. Obviously, the guilds in there might be a bit bigger, but we don't really expect them to reliably be able to shift groups that are more than 5 to 10 people. The larger entrances, the 20 man entrances, will be much more rare. So they will be there occasionally, and there is also a little bit of content in the roads for groups of that sort of size, of around 20 to 25 people. But that's not going to be the focus. The focus will really be on the majority of entrances, allowing you to move around 1 to 5, maybe 7 players.
Okay, and so you're saying that it's mostly used for travel. How would somebody determine where they're going? I guess this is a two-parter. 1, determine where they're going in the Outlands so that they can get to where they want to. And 2, find their home plot inside of the mist, because it sounds like this is a very random situation.
Yeah, so I mean, if you are looking for your home plot from the outside and you have nobody on the inside, then that's going to be an extremely difficult task. The normal way, how if you're living inside of the mists and you want to find, the way to your home, would be that someone from the home location scouts the path and sees where the entrance is, that the closest entrance in the open world that they can find, and then they would tell somebody to use that one, because like if you're looking from the outside, it's basically like looking for a needle in a haystack, and that's exactly what's going to provide a certain amount of safety to the guilds who are choosing to live in a place like that. But it also means that they have to deal with additional challenges, that they have to make sure that they get back to their home location before the open connections to that place collapse, because otherwise it might get really tricky to get back.
Very interesting. Also opens up a new opportunity for spying. Interesting. So as far as the traversal into the Outlands, though, how does that work? Do you go just into the mist and then you're teleported to a random location in the Outlands? And if you're in a random location in the Outlands, how would you get back to where you want to be?
So the roads or the mist, the roads locations don't just completely randomly connect. There is there's a very intricate set of rules that govern kind of how these roads connect, and that's something the players are going to have to discover. But in general, when you enter from the Outlands into one of these places, you're more likely to start in a place that typically is connected to the Outlands, and then you have to traverse the road to find your way to maybe a place that's more typically connected to the Royal Continent. So basically those kind of connections are possible, but you won't be immediately teleported like from Outlands into Royal. You typically have to traverse 1, 2, maybe 3 different sections of the roads, maybe 5. I mean, it kind of depends. It reshapes every day. So how good of a connection and where exactly it's going to lead is not going to be predictable.
Okay.
Yep.
So as a follow-up to that, what you're saying is, so you would enter from the Royals into a style of mist that, or a section of the mist that connects to the royals in general. And these tiles would all have many portals that are connected to the royals. And then you would go to your next mid-tier area that might be your adventuring area or your living area. And then you'd go again to your third area, which is the connected area to the Outlands. And if you made that trip once in a day and you remembered the tiles that you had to get through, you'd be able to find your way back.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, you'd have to kind of take care that you take a look at all the lifetimes of each of the connections, and we'll probably make those visible, so you can kind of predict how much time you have until you can return. But yeah, that's kind of how it will play. I mean, I don't want to spoil the details of how all of this is constructed, because there's going to be a lot of detail to the different locations you can find in there, and the quality of those, obviously, and how deep, how far away from the open world they are. So there's going to be a lot of rules for the players to figure out and kind of become experts at navigating the mist.
All right. Well, I think you gave us a lot of information there. There's a lot more questions we could ask, but it sounds like we've already dug in quite a bit.